Thank you, President John. Good afternoon, Rotarians and visitors. If you followed that first presidential debate, I guess 2 weeks ago, you heard one of the candidates use the acronym NFIB. And remember the story of Chris Matthews getting a tingle up his leg? Well, guess what? Our speaker that night got a tingle up his leg when he heard the candidate give that acronym. Our speaker today is Kevin Shivers, the State Director of National Federation of Independent Business. Kevin leads one of Pennsylvania's most influential business organizations. He serves as the NFIB's chief lobbyist and leads the organization's grassroots and political activities. Kevin has worked with 3 governors and the General Assembly to enact a host of new laws that have saved small employers thousands of dollars annually and protected their ability to run and grow their businesses. Before joining NFIB, Kevin worked as Deputy Press Secretary for Governor Tom Ridge, and it was great that we sat here and shared some memories of the Ridge administration when we were both up in Harrisburg. He also worked then for Governor Mark Schweikert, the Secretary of the Commonwealth, and the Pennsylvania Department of State. Kevin holds a BS degree in political science from Allegheny College. He resides near Harrisburg with his wife Karen. They have a 6-month-old daughter, and he said he did get some sleep last night. And I would ask that you give a warm welcome to Kevin Shivers.
Thank you so much, Brad, and I'm really honored to have the opportunity to break bread with you and talk with you a little bit about what the NFIB is all about and what our campaign to bring some sensibility to the regulatory climate, not only in Pennsylvania but in America as well. And it was fascinating to me because more than one person has told me that you better wrap it up by 1:20 or people are going to get up and walk out. And I assured them that I'm sure through my remarks people are going to get up and walk out in between anyway, so much sooner than that. But I do want to thank you. I really do appreciate how you start your proceedings together by singing God Bless America. As Brad mentioned, I have a 6-month-old at home, and I've sung that to her probably almost every day of her life. So, who we are as NFIB, and as Brad mentioned, we're a small business organization, and the common denominator for our membership is that you're not a publicly traded company. The 14,000 men and women that I represent here in Pennsylvania own family-owned businesses or closely held companies. We have 350,000 members nationally, and our membership is exclusive to the owners of businesses. We don't have government entities that are part of our membership. There are no nonprofits that are part of our membership. Our membership is exclusive of the presidents and CEOs and chief operating officers of family-owned and closely held companies. And also, too, our organizations, we actually, I think, complement our local chambers and other local economic development organizations because my organization exclusively is an advocacy organization. And I think that's a wonderful partnership role that we can play within the business community to help build a stronger business environment in our state because we don't have to worry about government threatening a grant or a loan or an economic development project because of the positions that we take. My membership is exclusively about advocacy, and it's very refreshing, I think, within the business community that there is a voice out there that doesn't fear retribution. They're going to lose a sewer project or they're going to lose a permit on a project somewhere in the state or in a community because their membership actually takes a stand on an issue that's important to the business community. And we have a number of allies within state and local chambers across the Commonwealth and other economic and development manufacturing organizations across the Commonwealth and also here in Pennsylvania. As Brad and I were reminiscing about our time in the Ridge administration, I got to tell you, my public service career was probably the greatest part of my life. I truly enjoyed every minute of it because I had an opportunity to work with people every day who were smarter than me, and I did everything I could to keep up. The greatest part about this job, and I say it is the greatest job I've had in the private sector, because I every day work with people that work harder than I do. Some of them are smarter Most of them are wiser. Many of them have a risk-taking ability and a risk tolerance that is exponentially superior to mine. And I'm amazed every day at how hard they work. And you know, the products, the services, and everything that they provide into their communities. I know many of you are involved in small businesses or the business community, and I salute you for everything that you do. NFIB was started almost 70 years ago. Thankfully, that's not my age. I wasn't there with the company when they started, but the organization started in 1943 by a fellow named Wilson Harder. And Wilson was the son of a small business owner, and he was very troubled at that time because most of the business organizations in America operated on the 80-20 rule, and that is the 20% of the wealthiest corporations in America dictated the policy for all the rest of the membership. And so there really wasn't an organization out there that provided us a voice for small businesses at the policy-making table. Another important factor in starting our organization was that Wilson, at that time, and you can imagine, this is 1943, and our servicemen and women were returning from the battlefields in Europe and in the Pacific. Wilson, in his mid-20s, mid-30s, remembered a time shortly after World War I. And he remembered at that time that servicemen were returning from the battlefields of Europe, and they were relegated to selling apples from street carts because this country didn't embrace an entrepreneurship agenda as part of its economic development policy, that there was no place in government that supported entrepreneurship and small business. And so when you have those two competing issues, that there was not an acknowledgement within government, the United States government at the time, to support economic development and for small companies and promote entrepreneurship, and you look at the policy dictated out of Washington, D.C. was primarily focused on helping the 20% of the wealthiest corporations in America, you realize that there was a significant need to help Main Street businesses and to encourage entrepreneurship and small business to thrive. So he started the National Federation of Small Business. It later became the National Federation of Independent Business, and we are the largest organization that is out there representing small and independent businesses across America. Most of you, that's our history. For those of you who don't know us, some of you may know us by a four-letter word that might be used by the President of the White House, because we were the organization that led the lawsuit against the federal government over the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, or also known as Obamacare. And our organization got involved in that lawsuit because it was the right thing to do for the businesses and workers and the people that we represent in our organization. I dare say all of the small business in America and all individuals. And I was asked the other day whether, now that the Supreme Court has affirmed the taxation policies included in the federal health care law, if maybe NFIB is reconsidering the fact that we were the tip of the spear in that lawsuit. And I said, absolutely not. The fundamental argument that we brought before the United States Supreme Court was that the individual mandate was unconstitutional because in that law, for the first time in American history, Congress said that you have to do something for the mere fact that you exist. That just for the fact that you exist, you now have to go out and create economic activity. And the fact that you choose not to do something by itself was economic activity. And it's interesting because there was more than one point that we made in our arguments before the court. And what is fascinating is that we actually won on all of them. And what is fascinating even further is that for the next 70 years, first-year law students are going to be required reading is going to be NFIB versus Sebelius et al. And it is a significant point because we didn't lose on the merits of our case. No, we actually won, and the court reaffirmed the fact that Congress does not have the authority to force us to do something by virtue of the fact that we exist. Now, what they did affirm was that the taxation power of the federal government of Congress is virtually unlimited, which is a concern in of itself. But I just wanted to give you a couple of thoughts on the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. And it was enacted for two reasons, we were told, right? The first was the incredible amount of uncompensated care that was killing our hospitals and killing our provider community. And the other was that there was a burgeoning number of uninsured in America. A couple of things to consider. That the total amount spent in this nation on health care is $2.5 trillion. The cost of uncompensated care in America is $7 billion. Now again, those are really big numbers, but we're talking about raising $1 trillion in new taxes, and we're talking about raising $1 trillion in new costs for $7 billion in uncompensated care. Another important point, the taxes and the other costs associated with rising premiums as a result of this federal health care law, the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, now estimates that 30 million people will still remain uninsured even after the federal health care law takes effect. Now that's something I think that's very signature, because remember, there were 43 million Americans that are currently uninsured, and that was the basis of this law. So again, we are imposing $1 trillion in new taxes, adding another $1 trillion in new costs to provide health insurance for 13 million people. Did we really do our job? I mean, is that penny wise or pound foolish? Another important point about it is this. There is a tax included now, because of this federal law, that says that if you do not buy health insurance, you have to pay a tax, and for a family of 3, it's about $2,100. Well, guess what? And all of you know this. The average annual policy for a health insurance policy is about $15,000. So you have a choice going forward. You can buy a $15,000 policy, or you can pay a $2,100 tax. Add something further, the federal law now allows insurance on demand. There's no exclusions for pre-existing conditions. You are able to purchase insurance at any time. Again, if you get injured, you will get care in a hospital or a provider. So my question again to you is, are you going to pay $15,000 for a health insurance policy, or are you just going to pay $2,100 for a tax? Because again, you're covered either way. What's going to happen? The people who are truly unhealthy, the ones who are really sick, who cannot afford to go without insurance, they're the ones that are going to be the only ones that are buying health insurance. Guess what? Their premiums are going to skyrocket, and the problem is only going to get bigger. So those are our arguments and our rationale for opposing the federal health care law, and it's the reason why NFIB is continuing to oppose the legislation and hopefully working forward with Congress in repealing it in the next session. But the other issues that we are concerned about, and the rest of my talk is the federal health care law is just merely one piece in a costly regulatory scheme coming out of Washington that is impacting small employers and manufacturers, not only in Pennsylvania, but across America. If you look at the cost of completing federal paperwork and complying with federal rules, all businesses in this country, it costs about $1.3 trillion annually to comply with federal regulations. If you want to put that into a per worker perspective for small businesses, and again, this is a statistic that's provided to us by the Small Business Administration, it costs every small business owner about $10,000 per worker per year just to comply with federal regulations. So you can see the significant cost of regulations. And again, we all want clean water, we all want clean streets, we all want safe workplaces, but there really is a cost. And going forward, the tidal wave of regulations that are about to befall us is truly staggering. Currently in the pipeline in Washington, there are over 4,200 regulations that are being proposed in Washington. Good God, how bad are our lives that we need the federal government to impose over 4,000 new rules to regulate what we do and how we do it. About 800 of those 4,000 new rules are specifically targeted to small business, and we're estimating that the full impact of these regulations are about $500 billion. That's significant. The other worry that we have is that many of the regulations that have already been imposed or that are being proposed are just truly, the law of unintended consequences is staggering. For example, the federal government recently imposed a new regulation on the remediation of lead in our homes. So now, as a result of a federal rule, anytime you do any type of home improvement, when you hire a contractor to do that work, they have to verify that your home is lead-free. You need to provide them with a certification, and if you do not provide them with that certification, you need the home remodeler is required to assume your home has lead in it, and they have to take special steps to remediate that lead. What do they need to do? Well, if you're having a window replaced or you're having your house repainted on the outside, we have to put we have to cover your shrubs and cover the yard around the house to prevent any lead flakes from actually falling into the shrubbery or into the ground around the home. If you're having work done in a house that has a 12-year-old, that 12-year-old is prohibited from actually being in the home while that home improvement is taking place. There are special vacuums and HEPA filters and Tyvek suits that home improvement professionals are required now to use, which ultimately are raising the cost of doing this type of home improvement project by between 25 and 30%. Well, what's that? What's 25 and 30% to save our children, right? Isn't that the reason for the regulation? Well, here's the thing. There are a lot of American families that are hurting right now. Many of them have lost jobs. Many of them have been reduced in their employment from full-time to part-time status. And when faced with the idea of actually having to hire a home remodeling professional, and paying an additional 25% to have that work done, guess what? They're choosing to do it on their own. So instead of having a professional remodeler come into a home and do the job right and make sure that it's done safely and it's not going to damage the structural integrity of the house, and to make sure that this lead is remediated properly, you have Dad stripping the window while Junior is eating his Frosted Flakes in the kitchen. Now I have to ask you, are we really protecting the public when we're forcing consumers to make decisions that are not in the best interest of helping their public safety? Absolutely wrong. Another one, there's a new rule regarding fall protection for people that work on houses. There is a commercial regulation that says that any work that's done 6 feet off the ground, you need to have special saddles and strappings and all kinds of hooks and lines to make sure that you don't fall. Well, now they're applying those to home building. So now, anytime you are working 6 feet off the ground, your home remodeler or builder is going to have to set up this trapeze-like arrangement with ladders and saddles and ropes and everything else to make sure you don't fall off the ground. 6 feet off the ground. Now, what I find ironic about that is when you're digging a basement, and most basements are between 8 and 10 feet, you don't need to have ropes and lines and anything over that 10-foot hole. But the minute you get 6 feet off the ground, you need to put up this new block and tackle system. So we're now requiring these home builders and remodelers to spend a day setting these things up. To fix a window, it may take half a day, and spend another day taking down this block and tackle and everything else that goes along with it. There are proposed regulations to regulate farmers and the farm dust that they generate. There are proposed regulations that would prohibit farmers from using young people on their family farms. There's a proposed it's a regulation now that requires communities, it's a federal regulation that requires communities to replace their street signs because they're not highly visible. Think about this, ladies and gentlemen. We have how many communities in this state that are in Act 47 financial distress? We can't pay for firefighters, we can't pay for police protection, and the federal government is now telling these communities that we'd like your street signs to be a little bit brighter. I see there's a number of members of the clergy here, and there's a Catholic priest back there, and I'm grateful, because after my presentation, I'm going to go to confession. These proposed regulations, again, over 4,000 proposed regulations, an economic cost of $500 billion. It's going to be like a wet blanket on not only the Pennsylvania economy or the American economy. And that is a real concern to our members. Here in Pennsylvania, the economic impact of these 4,000 new regulations If we're estimating it'll affect about 1 million jobs in this state and cost the economy of Pennsylvania about $105 billion. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not being political. I'm just explaining facts. If you find these facts negative, it's only a reflection of the kinds of negative activity that they are generating. NFIB recently joined a survey with the National Association of Manufacturers to find out how small businesses and manufacturers view the tax and the regulatory climate here in this country. And I think these results are sobering. And we found in this survey of, I think, 800 manufacturers and small business owners, 67% of them said that there is so much uncertainty right now that it's precluding their interest or ability to expand, grow, or hire new workers. So right now, the fear of these 4,000 new regulations and the potential taxes that are down the pipe, they have actually forced employers to tread water, to stay in place and not do anything because they can't plan. There is no stability. There's no predictability in the marketplace. So they're holding on to their money. They're not creating jobs. And the only ones that are creating jobs, it seems, are the ones that are getting government money. In fact, those are the ones that already can do it financially. They have the ability to grow and thrive, but government chooses to give them a grant or a credit or a loan to give them free money to do what they were already positioned to do. Here's another important fact. 69% say the Obama administration's regulatory policies are hurting small businesses and manufacturing. Even more sobering, 55% of these manufacturers and small business owners and CEOs report that they would not start a business today given the current regulatory environment. And still 54% of these manufacturers and small business owners say that countries like China and India are more supportive of their own small businesses and manufacturing than they believe that the United States government is of theirs in their own. Well, what's NFIB doing about it? Well, as I mentioned, last year we launched a coalition, a campaign to stop the regulatory tidal wave that's befalling the American small business and manufacturing sectors. It is called the Coalition for Sensible Regulations. In Pennsylvania, there are some 40 different business organizations, associations, and businesses that have signed up to be a part of this campaign. And we've launched a new website. It's called stopthetidalwave.org, where you can learn more about the regulatory costs and impacts that are going to be befalling the small business economy in the next 4 years of a second Obama administration. And look, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not telling you who to vote for. I'm just telling you what exists and the potential. And I told you people would be leaving before 120. In any event, we started that, and I think, what has been the result? Well, I think something has been important. I think we have made an impact. In the first presidential debate, we did hear an awful lot about the cost of regulations and the impact of these regulatory mandates on small businesses. And you know what? That theme is involved in virtually every congressional election across America. What I was disappointed about is last night when we heard that town hall meeting, not a single member of the audience raised a question about the cost of regulations and the impacts on consumers, on the impacts on employers, and on the impacts of our communities. And I think that shows the job that we have. There's a disconnect between the average Joe lunch bucket and these regulations that are affecting their jobs. We're growing. Hopefully now all of the candidates, the politicians understand it's a problem, but we need to continue our campaign to reach everyday Americans, workers, and others to understand the cost of regulations. And with that, I thank you very much for your time, and indeed it was an honor. Is there any questions? Oh. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Kevin, years ago, my company was a member in NFIB, and at that time, NFIB conducted surveys for members that was nonpartisan. I remember doing one comparing the wages, fringe benefits of private industry with schools, like Bill Simpson, the president of our local NFIB. Is NFIB still doing that type of task for the members?
The question was, it was actually a gratuitous advertisement for NFIB. He was a former member and encourages all of you to join. But the question he had was, what type of research is our organization doing for our membership? Yes, we ballot our members on all of our policy positions. We're a democratic organization with a small d, majority rules, but also we provide research. We call it the Small Business Optimism Index, where we actually measure what business owners feel going forward in the upcoming quarter. What are their plans to hire? What are their plans to expand? What are their plans to add capital and access to credit? And we have a whole data set of that trend line. And truly right now, the optimism level of small businesses across America is very pessimistic. But we have all kinds of other research as well. If you go to nfib.com/research, you'll be amazed at how much information is available there. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Kevin, I have a question. Looking at your side and listening to your presentation, we're told that, and I really don't mean this to be political, but that 4,000 regulations have been brought forward by the Obama administration. Are we saying that the administration brought them forward, or during the tenure of that administration, Congress brought them forward? Who are we looking at for those influx of regulations?
Again, that was another advertisement to join NFIB if you're a small employer. But the question that he had was regarding the 4,000 regulations. Who are proposing these regulations? And these are regulations that are being promulgated by the federal agencies in the administration. Now, many of these regulations are statutorily required. But there are places, for example, back when he was a presidential candidate, the president made it very clear that, he was going to put coal-operated companies out of business. And if you look at the new rules and regulations that are being promulgated by the Environmental Protection Agency, they are targeting coal. There really is a war on coal in America.
Social-driven economies. I don't know how that directly affects all of their regulations and so forth, but their economies are growing and getting stronger because of the fact that they back away from their socialistic or social-driven economies. Can you make any comments on their reduction in regulations or the reduction in laws in those countries? Compared to what we're talking about, or if you have no comment, I understand.
The question regarding there is evidence that your one member has that Sweden and Canada have actually have started to roll back their socialized economy policies, and that they're doing better. And what do we know about the regulatory climate in those countries? And to be honest with you, I don't. Anecdotally, from what I read in the paper, you can see that the economies in Canada are certainly becoming more pro-growth and are becoming more friendly to the free enterprise system. And certainly they are doing better. I would juxtapose that with the situations in Greece and Europe and other socialized nations where they are just straddled with staggering levels of debt, which we are too. And I think that poses a significant problem for the free enterprise system in America. All right, everybody, thank you very much. Appreciate it.